When you think about Mexico, do you only think about this wall? I'm Brandon Lewis, and for the next half hour, we're going beyond the border to meet the people who live and work in Mexico every day. Some are U.S. citizens who cross the border daily. Others are asylum seekers who want a chance to live the American dream. They've traveled from southern Mexico and Central America and are waiting for asylum. It requires them sometimes to wait in shelters, sometimes sleep on the streets or even in a tent until their number is called. It happens every day beyond the border. As the sun rises in Tijuana, migrant volunteers set up a tent at the Ped West crossing. It's a job, as best we can tell, reserved for Mexican nationals hoping to shorten their wait to request asylum in the U.S. They oversee a mysterious notebook that contains the names of everyone who wants to have their case heard. Each family is given a number. Every morning, volunteers call out a select few. On this day, they start with 2413. Hundreds of migrants listen and hope their long wait will finally come to an end. They've waited months to cross into the U.S. The entire process is fraught with controversy. Immigrant rights groups say it's illegal. Border security advocates claim it prevents the U.S. asylum system from being overrun. Officially, the process is overseen by volunteers and not any government group, although Mexican immigration officials from Grupo Beta answer questions from the crowd. Off to the right, new arrivals place their names in the book for the first time to assure their place in line. Without warning, the bullhorn stops and the crowd disperses. Families return for another long night in the shelters.
I sleeping in here, in this little house.
Fidelia de la Cruz has called this shelter home for the past month.
When it rains outside, the wind coming the floor is very cold.
She says she lived in Seattle, Washington for 15 years before returning to Mexico to visit her sick brother.
We asked Fidelia to show us around her house and show us a few of the possessions that she has inside.
It could be another month before her name is called for asylum at the border. This shelter is one of more than a dozen in Tijuana. It's currently home to 30 children and their parents who want asylum.
At least they have a place under the roof where they can feel safe.
Father Fidel Rivero brings donations for the families from his parish in Temecula. He knows all too well what could happen if these migrants are not granted asylum by the U.S. government.
And then they get rejected. Most of them are going to try to cross illegally. That's the reality, and it's been happening for many, many, many years.
The border backlog is the result of the U.S. government's metering policy, where only a limited number of asylum seekers are allowed into the U.S. each day. Today, about 30 names are called. Grupo Beta places the migrants into a van. The few items they have are loaded into a pickup. We follow them for about a mile through the streets of Tijuana. They're let off at the eastern pedestrian crossing at San Isidro.
We followed the group for as far as we could. Grupo Beta then said if we went any further, that we could get arrested. We watched as the group of migrants proceeded into the United States, where a CBP officer was waiting for them.
I'm with Channel 8.
But News 8 also had a camera on the U.S. side of the pedestrian crossing. Our exclusive video shows customs officers taking about 3 dozen asylum seekers into custody. Most of these are families who are held in the Otay Mesa detention facility for 3 to 5 days. Some are later returned to Mexico with a court date.
I can't observe them.
No, not here.
Others are released with a GPS ankle bracelet and a promise to appear in court. There are thousands of asylum seekers who are inside the United States waiting for their day in court. Nationwide, only about 35% of all asylum requests were granted last year. In San Diego, less than 25% of asylum cases were approved in the last 5 years. There are so many people who are seeking asylum in the United States, it's overwhelming detention centers, especially in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. The U.S. government is flying in asylum seekers to San Diego for processing. We were there when the first flights touched down at San Diego International Airport. This plane touched down at San Diego International Airport with at least 120 people on board who were caught entering the U.S. illegally. All are non-criminal families who were apprehended in Texas's Rio Grande Valley. The area is seeing a surge of crossings between points of entry. Border Patrol officials say it's 200% over capacity. The new plan will shift processing duties to other ports, so after a quick medical check when they're caught, some families will get put on a bus or plane like this one and transported elsewhere, where agents will start their casework by gathering their name, fingerprints, and family status. Then, if families want to request asylum, they can do so here. From there, they'll turn them over to Immigration and Customs Enforcement within 72 hours. Del Rio, Texas was the first, and San Diego is now the second city. Officials say they are working on a plan to expand the program to Buffalo, Miami, and Detroit, all cities they say have excess capacity for processing. San Diego's interim chief patrol agent Douglas Harrison tells News 8, quote, "This is a contingency operation. We've got to give Rio Grande Valley some relief. Our intent is to move through this process as quickly and fairly as possible," unquote. For us here in San Diego, it means taking in 3 plane loads a week. We watched as detainees were loaded onto buses. Then we followed those buses south to Otay Mesa, where Border Patrol agents will process them at their Brownfield station. Officials do not expect to set up the so-called tent cities like in Texas, but Chief Harrison did say they will be given mats, blankets, and food, and praised the work by agents handling the humanitarian crisis. This is not unprecedented, with the agency saying they used a similar program in 2014 when the number of people crossing illegally also surged.
We hear over and over again, just on the other side of the wall, Tijuana, the most dangerous city in the world. So we did ride along with the city's police department to see what's really happening on the streets beyond the border.
Tijuana was called the most dangerous city in the world. More than 2,000 people were murdered here last year. Officer Jorge Garcia Palomo supervises 80 officers tasked with keeping Zona Rio safe.
Since I do this every day, I've noticed things have gotten better.
We ride with Palomo as he patrols the city streets. He says his most frequent issue is drivers without seatbelts and talking on their phones.
What are you looking for when you're driving on this street?
This is an area where we have to drive a little slower, make sure things are okay outside the businesses.
Soon he pulls over as we walk the beat.
I like all of it. I was born here. I was raised here. All my family lives here. I love Tijuana. It does make me sad when people say this is the most dangerous city in the world.
As we're walking, we notice officers and medics helping a woman on a nearby corner and go see what's happening.
So he was just telling us that this was a person that needed help. They mixed something in their beer and had a pill, and so they're just working to give her the medical attention that they need.
Palomo stresses the department is working hard to improve its image as an agency dedicated to helping those they protect.
It's my brother, it's my jefe, my amigo.
We bump into these Americans as we walked back to the car.
#1 police is Tijuana police.
Why you say that? Yeah.
I say that because they help everybody. They respect everybody. They help and respect, but they do their job. The law is the law in Tijuana. They do their job, but they help everybody.
Tijuana is also pushing back as its designation as the most dangerous city, saying homicides are down 34% in the first 2 months of the year. Overall, crime is down 40% since 2008, citing the recent arrest of nearly 4,000 low-level drug dealers.
Our 2 objectives. The first is for people to have trust in us and feel safe. We want to gain the trust of the community.
As our ride comes to an end, Palomo overhears a call and hits the siren. It turns out to be less urgent than expected.
So this came in as a person who was disoriented on a bus. Now, we don't see a bus anywhere around here, but when they arrived, they talked to him a little bit, and they're actually just going to give him a ride home.
We later learned the man called 911 on himself. Palomo wasn't upset, again stressing the care his department has for the community.
I would say don't be afraid. I invite you to come to Tijuana. Here in this zone, there are great places to eat, places to have fun, and you should always feel safe here at the end of the day. If you're a tourist, nothing will happen to you.
And most don't seem deterred.
Tijuana is the most safest city there is.
The number of Americans visiting Mexico was up 12% in 2017. Coming up next, a U.S. citizen living in a shelter in Tijuana with his wife and 3 children. We'll tell you why they may have to wait more than a year before entering the U.S. legally when we continue Beyond the Border. Welcome back to Beyond the Border. There's been an outpouring of support for a U.S. citizen living in Tijuana in a shelter with his wife and 3 children. San Diegans have stepped up donating money for their effort. They're trying to cross legally into the United States. News 8's Carlo Cicchetto introduces us to the Caldwell family. Philip Caldwell tells us his family is no longer living in a shelter. They rented a room in Tijuana, and San Diego Catholic Charities is providing legal assistance to them as they one day hope to reach the United States. Meanwhile, Americans cross every day into Mexico to buy goods and services, and that includes prescription drugs. When Beyond the Border continues, a hidden camera investigation into Tijuana pharmacies. Welcome back to Beyond the Border. Prescription medication prices in the United States are among the highest in the world, but medications can be cheaper in Mexico. News 8's Barbara Lee Edwards takes a look at Tijuana pharmacies in this hidden camera investigation. The FDA recommends Americans don't try to import medication from Mexico. For one thing, the agency can't verify the medication is safe, and if you don't have a prescription from a U.S. doctor, it could get taken away at the border. Coming up next, News 8 sports anchor John Howard is a frequent border crosser with his dog Tiki when Beyond the Border continues. Welcome back. As we think about Mexico, it's hard not to get caught up in the politics between the border and the wall. But in this next segment, we put politics aside as we follow News 8 sports anchor John Howard to Tijuana with his dog, Tiki. San Diego's relationship with Tijuana and the border is complex. It can be overwhelming and politically divisive. We here at News 8 will continue to follow developments, whether it's here in the United States or beyond the border. I'm Brandon Lewis. Thanks for watching.